You're holding a bottle worth $50. Inside, pressure builds to 90 pounds per square inch, 3 times your car tires. One wrong move and the cork becomes a projectile. The monk on the label who supposedly invented this? He spent his life trying to prevent what's happening inside. The bubbles weren't a discovery, they were a defect. So, how did a winemaking failure become the world's most celebrated drink? Champagne has a mythology problem. The story goes like this. Dom Pérignon, a 17th century French monk, accidentally discovered sparkling wine and exclaimed, "Come quickly, I am tasting stars." A beautiful image. But the reality is quite different. That quote first appeared in a print advertisement in the late 1800s, nearly 2 centuries after his death. The real Dom Pérignon hated bubbles. In his era, bottles would explode without warning, sometimes setting off chain reactions that destroyed entire cellars. Workers wore iron masks for protection. The pressure from secondary fermentation turned wine storage into a genuinely dangerous occupation. Pérignon devoted his entire career to preventing re-fermentation, not celebrating it. He wanted still, clear wine. The bubbles were his enemy. So who actually figured out how to make them intentionally? The English did. In 1662, scientist Christopher Merritt presented a paper to the Royal Society documenting how to add sugar to wine to create deliberate effervescence. That was 6 years before Dom Pérignon even arrived at his abbey. The English had one crucial advantage: stronger glass. French bottles shattered under pressure. English glassmakers, preserving timber for naval shipbuilding, burned coal instead of wood in their furnaces. The higher temperatures produced glass that could withstand 6 atmospheres of pressure without exploding. While French winemakers watched their cellars shatter, English merchants were deliberately adding sugar to imported wine and bottling it in vessels that held. The French considered bubbles a flaw. The English considered them a feature worth engineering. The process that makes champagne special happens entirely inside the bottle. First, fermentation creates still wine. Nothing unusual. Then winemakers add a precise mixture of yeast and sugar, seal the bottle with a crown cap, and wait. The yeast consumes the sugar, producing alcohol and carbon dioxide. But trapped under a sealed cap, the gas has nowhere to escape. It dissolves into the liquid under mounting pressure. A standard bottle contains 5 liters of compressed gas waiting to release. When you finally pop the cork, that dissolved carbon dioxide escapes as bubbles. The magic isn't the grapes, it's the prison. The bottle becomes a pressure vessel, transforming simple wine into something that literally attacks your tongue with thousands of tiny explosions per sip. Here's where the story flips. After fermentation, the bottle is full of dead yeast. For decades, champagne was served cloudy, sediment swirling in every glass. Then came Barbe Nicole Clicquot, a 27-year-old widow who took over her husband's failing wine business in 1805. She invented the riddling rack. Bottles placed at angles, rotated daily, tilted until sediment collected in the neck. 6 to 8 weeks of careful turning. Her innovation made clear champagne possible for the first time. Today, machines called gyro palettes replicate her technique in just 7 days, but the principle remains hers. Every crystal-clear flute you've ever raised owes its clarity to a young widow who refused to sell cloudy wine. The economics of champagne defy logic. Spanish cava uses the identical production method. Same secondary fermentation in bottle. Same riddling. Same disgorgement. Yet cava costs $12 while champagne costs $40 or more. The difference isn't technique, it's geography and time. Champagne requires 15 months aging on dead yeast for non-vintage bottles, 3 years for vintage. That's expensive warehouse space, tied-up capital, and patience that costs real money. The Champagne region itself is tiny, strictly limiting supply. And the name carries centuries of accumulated prestige built through relentless marketing. When you buy champagne, you're paying for limestone soil, strict regulations, and legacy. Cava gives you the same bubbles. Champagne gives you the story behind them. The part that surprises everyone is the violence at the end. After months of aging, the yeast sediment must leave the bottle. The neck plunges into a glycol bath at -27 degrees Celsius. In 5 minutes, an ice plug forms, trapping all the sediment inside. The cap pops off. 6 atmospheres of pressure eject the frozen plug like a tiny cannon shot. The wine barely foams because the cold keeps the gas dissolved. Workers top off the lost liquid with a secret mixture of sugar and wine called dosage, then seal with the final cork. Modern lines disgorge 18,000 bottles per hour. Some houses still do it by hand, losing wine with every bottle, accepting inefficiency as tradition. The final irony lives in the wire cage. That little wire basket holding your cork down? It exists because of Dom Pérignon's failure. He spent decades trying to keep corks in bottles, to prevent the explosions he despised. The wire cage was invented in 1844, over a century after his death, specifically to contain the pressure he worked so hard to eliminate. Every champagne bottle is a monument to solved problems. Stronger glass from English furnaces, clear wine from a widow's clever invention, controlled pressure from generations of trial and error. The monk who supposedly invented champagne would probably be horrified to see his name on the most expensive bottle in the entire category. Next time someone pops champagne at midnight, you'll see it differently. The monk didn't invent it. The English did. A widow made it clear. And 90 pounds of pressure per square inch is held back by nothing but glass, cork, and a small wire cage. Same exact method as $12 cava, 4 times the price. The bubbles themselves don't know the difference. But somehow, over centuries of marketing and mythology, we've decided they should. Happy New Year! What's in your glass right now?